She doesn't even know what day it is, Your Honor. She can barely dress herself. My stepmother said it calmly, without hesitation. She sat just 3 feet away from me in that courtroom, wearing my late father's credit card on her wrist, a Cartier watch he had given her 2 Christmases ago, and she told the judge I was mentally incompetent. I didn't react. I didn't cry. I simply folded my hands in my lap and counted silently. 14. That was the number of days she had left before she lost everything she had taken from my family. Be honest. Have you ever been in a room full of people who were supposed to support you and watched every single one of them accept a false story about you? If you understand that feeling, leave a comment. I want to know how many people have experienced this. That morning, in courtroom 4B of the Harris County Probate Court in Houston, Texas, I was surrounded by people who shared my last name, and not one of them stood with me. My stepmother, Diane, had been part of my life since I was 11. She married my father just 8 months after my mother passed away from pancreatic cancer. She arrived with blonde highlights, a real estate license she never used, and a smile that could charm anyone. My father, a kind man overwhelmed by grief, believed she was helping him, but what seemed like support became control. For 17 years, she managed his life. She distanced him from his brother, from old friends, from anyone who might have revealed the truth, that Diane didn't love him. She loved what he had. She valued the 4-bedroom house in River Oaks, the lake house in Conroe, and the steady income from the commercial real estate trust my grandfather had built in 1974. Then, 14 months ago, my father suffered a stroke. He passed away in the ICU at Houston Methodist at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning. I was holding his hand. Diane was in the waiting room on her phone with his financial advisor. In the week following his funeral, I learned 3 critical things. First, my father had updated his will 18 months before his death. He left the house to Diane, but the trust, valued at approximately $4.2 million in commercial property and investment accounts, was left entirely to me. Second, Diane had known about this change for 4 months. She had searched his desk while he was at a cardiology appointment and found the draft. Third, and this changed everything, during those 4 months, Diane had been quietly withdrawing money from the trust's operating account. The amounts were small enough to avoid attention. $5,000 here, $8,000 there. Just enough to maintain a lifestyle she knew she would soon lose, but not enough to trigger an audit. By the time my father passed, she had transferred just over $310,000 into accounts I couldn't initially access. Now, most people would react immediately. They would confront the situation, hire a lawyer, file a lawsuit, and alert the entire family. That reaction is expected, and it's exactly what Diane was relying on. Because Diane didn't just take money. She had a strategy. If I reacted emotionally, if I made accusations or lost control, she would use that behavior as evidence. She would present me as unstable, paranoid, unfit to manage the trust. She needed me to appear irrational. That was the second stage of her plan. First, take the money. Then take credibility. Without credibility, no one believes you when you say the money is gone. So I chose not to react. I did the opposite. I became invisible. I moved out of the apartment my father had helped me afford and into a small studio in Montrose that cost $800 a month. I kept driving my 10-year-old Civic. I wore simple clothes, jeans and t-shirts. I told no one what I had discovered. I attended family dinners. I smiled at Diane across the table. I let her take my hand and say, "Your father would have wanted us to stay close." And every night, after everyone left, I sat at my kitchen table with a laptop and a cup of black coffee, tracking every dollar she had touched. What Diane didn't realize was this. She believed I was just a mid-level analyst at an accounting firm. Predictable, unremarkable. What she didn't know was that I had spent 6 years conducting forensic audits for a firm specializing in fraud detection. I had worked on cases alongside the IRS, building evidence against individuals far more experienced than her. My work was about following money, step by step, until it led to the truth. She wasn't taking from a grieving daughter. She was taking from someone trained to uncover exactly this kind of behavior. But evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed her to expose herself completely. So I allowed it to continue. I monitored the transfers in real time. I documented each one, timestamps, IP addresses, device data. I traced the destination accounts through corporate filings in Nevada, Wyoming, and Delaware. She had created 3 shell companies, always 3, a common structure in financial fraud. One was named Bluebird Properties LLC, another was Gulf Horizon Consulting. The third, ironically, was called Legacy Asset Management. She called her operation Legacy. For 5 months, I observed and documented everything. I compiled a complete record, organized, detailed, and precise. Then Diane made her next move. She filed for emergency conservatorship, claiming I was mentally unfit to manage the trust. She brought in a psychologist, Dr. Edwin Marsh, who, as it turned out, was a golf acquaintance of her boyfriend. He submitted a report diagnosing me with severe dissociative disorder and cognitive decline. He had never met me. He had never evaluated me. He based his diagnosis entirely on what Diane told him over the phone. And that is how I ended up in courtroom 4B on a Wednesday morning in January, listening as my stepmother described me as if I were incapable of functioning. "She's missing bill payments," Diane told Judge Alderman, dabbing her eyes with a tissue she had prepared in advance. "She forgets conversations. She calls me at 2 a.m., confused about where she is. I'm worried for her, Your Honor. I promised her father I would take care of her, and I intend to keep that promise." Behind her, the gallery was full. My father's sister, Aunt Colette, sat there with her 2 daughters. A woman I didn't recognize, who I later learned was Diane's hairdresser, was also present, clearly there just to fill a seat. Everyone nodded along as if they were attending a presentation. Diane had been preparing them for months with calls, lunches, and emotional messages about how concerned she was about me. She had effectively turned my family into an audience, and now she was delivering a carefully constructed narrative. Her lawyer, a man named Curtis Hamley, wearing a suit slightly too tight, stood and addressed the bench. "Your Honor, we are requesting the appointment of Mrs. Diane Calloway as temporary conservator over the estate of the late Robert Calloway, specifically the Calloway Family Trust, to prevent further financial loss caused by the respondent's inability to manage her affairs." Judge Alderman looked at me over his glasses. He appeared to be in his early 60s, with silver hair, and the expression of someone experienced in assessing credibility. "Miss Calloway," he said, "these are serious claims. Your stepmother states that you are unable to care for yourself or manage your finances. How do you respond?" The room became quiet. Diane leaned forward slightly. Curtis clicked his pen. Aunt Colette held her breath. They were expecting an emotional reaction, confusion, distress, or hesitation. I stood up calmly. I adjusted my blazer and looked directly at Diane, holding her gaze for several seconds before turning to the judge. "I'm listening, Your Honor," I said. "I just want to ensure my stepmother has finished speaking. I wouldn't want to interrupt her while she's still under oath." Diane's expression shifted briefly. It was subtle but noticeable. Curtis quickly continued. "Your Honor, we have documentation, financial records showing a pattern of neglect and mismanagement." He handed a folder to the bailiff. "The trust's operating account has lost over $310,000 in the past 11 months. There are transfers to unknown entities, no oversight, and no proper filings. If that does not demonstrate incapacity, I'm not sure what does." Judge Alderman reviewed the documents. His expression remained neutral, but he paused writing, an indication something had caught his attention. Diane spoke again. "She doesn't even review her statements, Your Honor. I had to uncover this myself. Over $300,000 gone, and she had no idea. What kind of person loses that amount without noticing?" There was quiet discussion in the gallery. Aunt Colette leaned toward her daughter. Gerald shook his head. From their perspective, the situation seemed clear. I allowed a brief pause, just enough for the room to settle, then spoke. "Your Honor, may I approach the bench?" Judge Alderman nodded. I picked up a black binder from the table. It was substantial, around 200 pages, organized with colored tabs, red for financial records, blue for digital forensics, green for corporate filings, and yellow for perjury-related evidence. "I didn't lose track of $310,000, Your Honor," I said, placing the binder in front of him. "I monitored every transaction. I know exactly where the money went, when it was transferred, and who initiated it." Diane remained still, but her hands tightened on the table. I opened to the first red tab. These are wire transfer records from the trust's operating account. Over the past 11 months, there have been 47 separate transfers to 3 LLCs: Bluebird Properties, Gulf Horizon Consulting, and Legacy Asset Management. I paused briefly and looked toward Diane. All 3 companies were incorporated in Wyoming using a registered agent service, while the public filings list a nominee director, the beneficial owner. The individual controlling the accounts is identified in confidential state records. Curtis stood up. "Objection, Your Honor. This is outside the scope." I continued. "The beneficial owner of all 3 entities is Diane Marie Calloway, my stepmother, the same person requesting control of the funds." The courtroom reacted immediately. Voices rose. Several people leaned forward in their seats. Diane's composure broke. "That's not true," she said. "She fabricated that. She's delusional. This is exactly what I've been explaining. She's paranoid." Judge Alderman raised his hand, restoring order. He looked at Diane with a measured expression, then turned back to me. "Continue, Miss Calloway." I turned to the blue tab. "These are IP logs associated with each transfer. Every transaction originated from the same device, a Dell Inspiron laptop connected to the home network at 1847 Willow Creek Lane." I paused. "That is my stepmother's residence, the same property my father left to her." Curtis attempted to intervene again, but I moved to the next section. "These are the bank statements for the 3 LLCs. The pattern is consistent. Funds are transferred from the trust, remain in the accounts for 30 to 60 days, and are then moved to a personal brokerage account at Charles Schwab." I looked at Diane. "That account is jointly held by Diane Calloway and an individual named Trevor Fisk. Would you like to explain who he is?" Diane said nothing. "Trevor Fisk," I continued, "is a real estate agent based in Galveston. He and my stepmother have been in a personal relationship for approximately 3 years. This began while my father was still alive and recovering from a cardiac event." I referenced additional documents. "I have supporting records, including hotel receipts, communication logs obtained through legal discovery, and a lease agreement for a beachfront condominium in Galveston, co-signed by both parties. That property was funded using money taken from the trust." The courtroom became silent again, but this time the tone had changed. People were no longer reacting, they were reassessing. Judge Alderman closed the binder and removed his glasses, taking a moment before speaking. He turned to Diane. "Mrs. Calloway, did you file this conservatorship petition knowing that you were responsible for these transfers?" Curtis immediately advised her not to respond, but Diane answered anyway. "It's not what it looks like," she said. "I was managing the funds. Robert authorized it before he passed. He wanted me to handle things." "He did not," I said, "and I can demonstrate that." I opened the yellow tab. "My stepmother submitted a document with her petition, a letter allegedly written by my father, granting her authority over the trust. It is dated 3 months before his death and includes his signature." Curtis's expression changed noticeably. "I had that letter examined by a certified forensic document specialist. The report is included here." I continued. "The signature is not original. It was digitally copied from a separate document, a 2023 property tax filing, and inserted into the letter using image editing software. The PDF metadata shows the file was created 4 days after my father's death, on a computer registered to Curtis Hamley's law office." Curtis reacted immediately. "This is completely inappropriate." "The document is a forgery," I said, addressing the judge directly. "It was submitted under oath as part of a fraudulent conservatorship petition. This is not only a matter of financial misconduct, Your Honor. Under Texas Penal Code Section 37.2, that constitutes aggravated perjury," I said. "And under Section 32.46, it is a first-degree felony to secure execution of a document by deception involving more than $300,000. Judge Alderman looked at Curtis for a long moment. "Mr. Hamley," he said calmly, "did you prepare that document?" Curtis was visibly sweating. The answer was clear, even before he spoke, because the metadata already showed it. Diane turned on him immediately. "He told me it would hold up," she said, pointing at Curtis. "He said no one would check. This was his idea." Curtis recoiled. Their alignment collapsed instantly, each trying to shift responsibility onto the other. "I didn't want this," Diane said, turning toward the gallery. Her voice strained, but the emotion didn't follow through. Robert was going to leave me with nothing. After everything I did for him, 17 years. I raised his daughter. I managed his home. "You kept his money," I said. "That's what you managed." Judge Alderman raised his hand again and took a measured breath before speaking. "This court finds no evidence of mental incapacity on the part of the respondent, Miss Calloway. The petition for conservatorship is denied with prejudice." He continued, "Furthermore, this court is referring the matter of the forged document and the fraudulent petition to the Harris County District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation." He then looked directly at Diane. "Mrs. Calloway, I strongly advise you to retain separate criminal counsel. Mr. Hamley will not be able to represent you, as he appears to be involved in the same matter." After a brief pause, he turned back to me. "And Miss Calloway, you indicated that these transfers crossed multiple jurisdictions?" "Yes, Your Honor. The shell companies in Wyoming, the brokerage account in Texas, and the Galveston property funded through interstate transfers?" "Yes, Your Honor." He nodded. "In that case, I will also refer this matter to the United States Attorney for the Southern District of Texas. This may qualify as interstate wire fraud." Diane's expression went still. Not anger, not fear, just realization. I sat down. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. It felt like reaching the end of a long and demanding process, exhausting but complete. The courtroom gradually cleared. Aunt Colette approached me in the hallway. She was emotional. "I didn't know," she said. "She told us you were." "I understand what she said," I replied. "I wasn't upset with her. Situations like this are rarely straightforward. People who manipulate others don't only influence their direct targets, they influence everyone around them. They construct a version of reality that can mislead even well-intentioned people." "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked. "Because I needed everyone to believe her," I said. "If there had been doubt, she might have changed her approach." She needed a full audience. She needed agreement in that courtroom. That was the only way she would feel confident enough to file the petition. And that petition placed the forged document on record under oath, where it became a criminal offense. Colette looked at me carefully. "You planned this?" "I prepared for the possibility," I said. "There's a difference." I stepped outside into the January air. Houston winters are mild, cool enough for a jacket, but still carrying a sense of transition. I stood on the courthouse steps and took a deep breath, the first one in months that felt complete. 3 weeks later, Diane was indicted on 6 counts: theft from an estate, forgery, aggravated perjury, securing execution of a document by deception, money laundering, and 1 federal count of wire fraud. Curtis Hamley was indicted separately on 3 counts, including conspiracy and tampering with a government record. Trevor Fisk was listed as an unindicted co-conspirator. The Galveston condo was seized. The brokerage account was frozen. Every dollar held within those shell companies was returned to the trust. Diane posted bail. She called me from an unfamiliar number. I considered not answering, but I did. "You ruined my life," she said. Her tone was flat. "No," I replied. "You built something using resources that weren't yours. I simply presented the facts." She ended the call. I blocked the number and several others she used afterward. When individuals like this lose, they don't stop immediately. They adjust their approach. But I was no longer available for that. I sold the lake house in Conroe. I used part of the proceeds to establish a scholarship fund in my mother's name at Prairie View A&M. She had been a first-generation college student. Supporting others in that position felt appropriate. I kept the trust, restructured it, replaced the financial advisor who had been too close to Diane, and hired a fiduciary accountable only to me. I moved into a better apartment. I adopted a rescue dog, a 3-legged mixed breed named Verdict. Aunt Colette and I began meeting for lunch once a month. It was uncomfortable at first, but over time it improved. She felt responsible for believing Diane. I told her what I had learned, that guilt is only useful if it leads to action. She began volunteering at a legal aid clinic, assisting elderly fraud victims. She approached it with patience and empathy. The case took 11 months to conclude. Diane accepted a plea deal and received 6 years in state custody. Curtis received 3 years and was disbarred. Trevor Fisk cooperated with federal authorities and received 18 months of home confinement. On the day of Diane's sentencing, I didn't attend. I didn't need to. Instead, I visited my mother's grave, a small cemetery in South Houston. I sat there and spoke openly about the trust, about Diane, about everything that had happened. And I acknowledged something I hadn't said before. For 5 months, while I was documenting everything, while I sat across from Diane at family dinners, I was afraid, every day. I woke up at night questioning whether I was making the right decisions, whether she would discover what I was doing, whether anyone would believe me. But I continued, not because I wasn't afraid, but because fear wasn't a valid reason to allow someone to take what my family had built. People often think strength means the absence of fear. It doesn't. Strength is recognizing what's happening, staying composed, and choosing the right moment to act. Diane relied on visibility and speed. I relied on documentation and timing. And when everything came forward, the outcome was clear. I'm not sharing this for sympathy. I'm sharing it because someone, somewhere, may be sitting at a table late at night reviewing numbers that don't make sense, questioning themselves. You're not mistaken. You're not imagining it. And you're not alone. Document everything. Speak carefully. And when the time is right, present the facts clearly and directly. Peace is not something that appears on its own. It's built step by step, page by page, often before anyone else sees it.